with that, we do have some big news that kind of came out over the weekend. Aegon's Conquest is happening. We are getting an Aegon's Conquest TV show, and it comes to us through the Hollywood Reporter here. I'll get this pulled up.
They always seem to be the ones that break this Game of Thrones news. Like George must have a guy
there. It seems like, and I've always found, like, often too, like a lot of Warner Brothers stuff, I feel like it's broken through them first, like not even like specifically like Warner Brothers stuff. I mean, and then it seems like Deadline, some of those other, they must have like more ties with Disney and some. So it seems like, and like Variety is another one. It seems like they all have kind of like their best sources are with like the different companies or whatever. But here we go. So Game of Thrones Aegon's Conquest spinoff in the works from the Batman Part 2 writer, which is Madison Tomlin, says HBO is developing another Game of Thrones spinoff series. The company is actively heating up its long in discussion Aegon's Conquest ideas. HBO is partnering with Madison Tomlin as an in-demand scribe who did uncredited work on Matt Reeves' The Batman and is co-writing the upcoming sequel, The Batman Part 2. He also wrote the Keanu Reeves action comic adaptation, BRZK Berserker, I think is what it's called. Animated Terminator series, which he's a showrunner for, that's going to be on Netflix. Aegon's Conquest is basically a direct prequel to the hit House of the Dragon, telling the story of the Targaryens' bloody and brutal conquest of Westeros. The story follows the invader Aegon Targaryen, who conquered the continent of Westeros with his sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya, and their dragons. Aegon successfully unified 6 of the 7 kingdoms in just 2 years, with Dorne, the only one who was able to resist. One source described the project as taking a back-to-basics approach for George R. R. Martin's epic fantasy universe. Though considering the first series was sprawling and complex, it's unclear what back-to-basics means exactly in the Thrones context. Variety previously reported Aegon's Conquest as an idea in discussion early last year. Remember, that was like when we got a little bit of like the snow ideas and some of the other things that may be talked about. Since Thrones concluded in 2019, there have been many prequels, and one sequel idea put in development, but none are, some are considered no longer active, though HBO prefers not to say any option is completely off the table. That's something George R. R. Martin said, as many of his blog posts that we've talked about. The efforts have spawned 2 greenlit shows, House of the Dragon, which second season comes out later this year, and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, The Hedge Knight, which starts production this year and is based on the Dunk and Egg series. So HBO had no content, and it just and that's basically it. So I thought we'd take today, Jimmy, to talk a little bit about Aegon's Conquest, what we think it might look like how many seasons it could be, and what we should get. So the only thing we know about it so far, right, this show, is it's coming. There's no mention of Ryan Condell. There's really no mention of even George R. R. Martin. Madison Tomlin, I will say, if he worked on Matt Reeves' Batman, I loved the Batman. That's the Twilight, Harry Potter actor. How am I blanking on his name? Robert Pattinson. Yeah, Robert Pattinson Batman, which to me is actually, it has become my favorite Batman movie, and I'm like a diehard Batman fan. I personally like it even more than The Dark Knight. So I mean, if it's coming from some of the people that worked on that, I'm so down for this.
Yeah. All right. So here's the thing. I always will remain optimistic until I need to not be, like until I see evidence otherwise. Ryan Condell can't do everything, right?
Exactly.
He can't do everything all at once, and who knows what else he has lined up. And I'm sure he's going to do things outside of Thrones as well. The lack of George R. R. Martin's mention is one of the things that could potentially be a red flag to me, but not to where I'm throwing it up and saying that this is terrible. No. There's also a chance that this is and this is a green light in the sense of like, let's start seeing what this would look like, right? This show's coming out for 3 seasons. Like, this isn't a confirmation. They still have to do a pilot, get that, Blood Moon or The Long Night or whatever the series was called, got all the way through the pilot and ended up getting tossed. So this is super preliminary still.
Game of Thrones almost got tossed.
That's right. Yeah, they had to reshoot the pilot. Apparently the first one was almost ridiculously laughable how bad it was. So my point is like, before we have such strong feelings about this being the best thing ever or the worst thing ever, and it's turning into a star, like, this is so preliminary. We have heard about Yeti, other shows, the Voyages, Nymeria, everything, right? So with that said, I would hope that George would be somewhat involved in this. What I could see this meaning, and when they said back to basics, I think that what that could mean is House of the Dragon is a historical, sweeping, epic narrative with time jumps, a whole lot of family drama, and a little bit less about the outside of the family drama. I think Aegon's conquest is a return to basics. And what they mean by that is that the entire realm is at play here. We're going to be seeing people in Harrenhal. We're going to be seeing Winterfell. All of the major houses will have represented players that will be playing major parts on it. And while it will focus on Targaryens, it's really more about Westeros. Now, House of the Dragon Civil War affects Westeros as a whole. That's undoubted, like obvious, right? But it's really more about this family who has been reigning with dragons since the conquest, coming into a new era where they will lose said dragons. It is the beginning of the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty. So I think that's what they mean. I think that's what they mean is like you have someone coming to shore, trying to essentially take over, which is not the best. And then how does that affect the rest of the realm? So, for instance, in a Game of Thrones, we see that Daenerys is eventually going to come her way over. We also have people taking stake to the claim. So I actually understand what they mean by return to basics. I think it's going to be a lot more about the house drama, who's aligning with who, and then going from there. I'm not saying the House of the Dragon doesn't have that, but I think more of the focus is honestly the downsides of royalty. I think that's fairly obvious if you watch House of the Dragon. So I think that's kind of what they mean. Maybe a little bit more of a linear moment by moment narrative that's a lot more intimate. I think that's what we would most likely see. There's going to be action, but I think it's going to be a lot more about dealing with this kind of invasion and then aligning and everything else. There's also a lot of cool stuff with the faith that we're going to see, right? Because the Targaryens do some things that are not flying with the Septons. They're not down with that. So you have this entire cultural piece to the conquest that I think is really, really fascinating, and also something that you're always going to have to deal with when it comes to an invasion or colonialism or whatever. So I like the idea of this. Will they add things and flesh more things out? Without a doubt. Will those things be good? I have no idea. But I like the talent that's behind the idea so far, like you said, with the Batman. I think that movie was very well received, very well shot. I think it got certainly some of the tones of Batman that maybe some of the other creators in that series has missed, which makes me happy. And this is someone who has adapted things, has worked with source material. All these things tell me that cautiously optimistic is not a terrible approach to have.